Railroads told Congress the caboose was obsolete, an $80,000 relic that a $4,000 box strapped to a coupler could replace. If the math was that simple, why did it take 6 years, a federal emergency board, a forced arbitration award, and the repeal of a 1911 Virginia crew law to make it happen? And why, in December 1994, did a failure in that replacement send a runaway freight down Cajon Pass and kill the crew? Someone killed the caboose. Cost was never the real reason, and the paperwork proves it. A line of red cabooses sits dead and silent in the weeds at the edge of the yard, rusting under the same sun that once lit up their cupolas. The oldest date back to the 1830s, when the Auburn and Syracuse Railroad first tacked a shanty to the end of a freight consist and called it a lookout. By 1883, the Brotherhood of Railroad Trainmen had made the caboose a symbol, part office, part shelter, part legal guarantee that a crew had a place to work and rest at the end of a long run. Now, in the mid-1980s, the numbers on the asset ledgers tell a story that management wants to look like simple arithmetic. Burlington Northern's 1985 inventory lists 432 cabooses, each valued at $80,000, each weighing 25 tons. In the same ledger, 1,124 end-of-train devices called free Ds appear at $4,000 apiece, barely 35 pounds each. Price guides from Railway Age and Trains magazine repeat the figures: $80,000 for a new bay window or cupola caboose, $4,000 for a Fred strapped to a coupler. But look closer at the photographs from Chicago and St. Louis yards in 1984. Whole tracks lined with dead-lined cabooses, paint peeling, windows smashed, numbers stenciled for scrap. The Brotherhood's name is faded on the step boxes, but the paperwork inside the cars is still there. Crew logs, waybills, the last records of a 4-person crew. The railroad's public claim was always about cost and weight. $80,000 versus $4,000. 25 tons versus 35 pounds. The math is brutal, but it is also incomplete. If money and mass were all that mattered, the caboose would have vanished overnight. Instead, it took years of legal maneuvering, arbitration, and the quiet repeal of laws that once made the caboose a requirement. The numbers were a cover story. The real work happened in the dark, in meeting rooms and board files. The next chapter is written in formal documents, not just in abandoned rolling stock. The paper trail begins with a memo stamped by the Federal Railroad Administration in September 1981. 3 pages, docket number 81124, signed by J. H. Martini, Chief of Safety. It authorizes, in dry regulatory language, the use of end-of-train devices on any freight consist operating without a caboose, provided the device meets the new performance criteria in Section 2.12.5. That memo sits at the top of the stack, but it is only the opening move. By June 23, 1982, the Department of Labor convenes a Presidential Emergency Board, PEB 8201. The board's report, issued that same day, spells out the logic. With new brake line monitors and radios, the old safety arguments for a caboose no longer hold up. The PEB does not declare the caboose dead outright. Instead, it hands the decision to the bargaining table under the Railway Labor Act. The language is careful: no permanent removal without a contract, no contract without a formal safety sign off from the FRA. 4 months later, the United Transportation Union sits across from the Association of American Railroads. The UTU's president, John R. Black, signs the national agreement on October 15, 1982. Article 10 is the kill shot. Operations without a caboose are now permissible wherever an end-of-train device is installed and the crew is trained. The contract requires a safety certificate for every EOT, and it bakes in a 5-year review. Black's signature is still visible on the scanned copy in the Union Archive, but some railroads drag their feet. The dispute lands in arbitration, and on April 23, 1985, Arbitrated Award 444 is handed down. The panel rules that Article 10 controls, and that with the FRA's EOT certification in hand, the last legal barriers are gone. By July 1, 1985, The order is clear: retire the caboose from all new freight consists. The documents are all there: docket numbers, signatures, dates stacking up in sequence. The legal machinery did what the cutting torch could not. Doug Riddell stands in the narrow aisle, boots on worn floorboards, hands moving over the hardware that made the caboose more than just a rolling shed. The cupola rises above his head, a steel-framed perch with double-pane windows, built for a brakeman to scan the roofs of 100 cars for smoke, shifting loads, or a hotbox. The Vantage isn't just for scenery. In the manuals, it's called the Lookout, the last real eyes on the train's tail, the first warning if anything goes wrong. Below the cupola, a battered desk holds a pile of waybills, a logbook, a battered lantern. Beside it, the stove squats on its fire brick pad, bolted to the floor. Coal or oil, depending on the line, either way it kept the crew alive through winter runs across Nebraska or Montana. The fuel tank sits in a steel box by the wall, with a pressure regulator valve stamped ICC standard. Riddell points to the valve mechanics: a lever, a 3-position block, service, lap, emergency. This is the conductor's backup, the fail-safe. Pull it to emergency and the brake pipe vents to the wind, dropping from 90 pounds per square inch to 0 in seconds. Every car on the train locks up. No batteries, no radio, just a hand and a piece of steel between safety and disaster. A bunk runs along the far wall, legal lodging for the crew under state law, no hotel needed, just a mattress and a wool blanket. The lavatory is little more than a closet with a tank, but it's the difference between a legal crew and a violation. On the rear platform, a tool rack holds a pry bar, a flag, a fusee, and the air whistle valve. Every object in this car is here by rule, by lawsuit, by the memory of accidents. The caboose is not a luxury, it's a working office, a lookout, and the last refuge when things go wrong at the end of a mile-long train. Brian Lewis, a 30-year man out of the Denver pool, steps up onto the rear platform, boots scuffing the diamond plate. Every move is a ritual. First, the flagman checks the tool rack, red flag, fusee, torpedo, all in their places. The brakeman's handbook spells out the drill in black and white. Before a freight leaves the yard, a 2-mile stretch behind the train must be protected. That means a flagman ready to walk the ballast, laying out torpedoes, small explosives that snap under a locomotive's wheels, and lighting a fusee for a red warning glow. If the train stops on the main, the flagman walks back, counting off 150-foot intervals, setting each warning by the book. Inside, the conductor's desk is already covered in paperwork, waybills, switch lists, crew log, all handwritten, all legal record. The rear valve sits at arm's reach, stamped with 3 positions: service, lap, emergency. Lewis demonstrates by pulling the lever, and the brake pipe vents to the wind, dropping 90 pounds of pressure to 0 in seconds. No radio, no battery, just a hand on steel. The rear end valve is the last line of defense, and every crew member knows it. The bunk along the wall is not a luxury, it is legal lodging required by state law. The lavatory, barely more than a closet, means the crew can stay on the move for 12 hours without a hotel. Every duty, flagging, logging, brake checks, signal calls, belongs to a specific job, conductor, rear brakeman, flagman. 4 crafts, each with a role, each written into the rulebook. The caboose is their domain. When it goes, so do the jobs. Lewis runs his hand over the valve and shakes his head and says, "You could trust the men back here. You cannot trust a box of wires." In the official record, the story of the caboose's elimination is told in a relentless series of dates and signatures, each one chipping away at the old order. The first blow lands in the early 1960s, when the Brotherhood of Locomotive Firemen and Enginemen faces the fireman's job being slashed from freight crews. Arbitration panels and the Interstate Commerce Commission sign off on the cuts, arguing that diesel engines no longer require a fireman to shovel coal. By 1973, the so-called 2-man yard crew deal is struck, another nail in the coffin for traditional crew sizes. The agreement, buried in the National Railway Labor Conference records, formalizes the reduction of switch crews from 4 or 5 men down to 2, with the promise of job protection for those already employed. The numbers are stark: thousands of jobs erased, with only a fading clause to shield the remaining men from immediate layoffs. The real acceleration comes with the Staggers Rail Act. Congress passes the bill on October 14, 1980, with President Carter's signature following days later. The act hands railroads sweeping new powers to set rates, abandon unprofitable lines, and negotiate labor contracts without the old federal strings. The industry press hails it as deregulation, but in the union halls it is seen as open season. Overnight, the legal ground shifts. State crew consist laws, once ironclad guarantees of 4-man and 5-man crews, are targeted for repeal. In Virginia, House Bill 1234 is introduced in January 1988, repealing the state's 1911 Caboose law by March. The pattern repeats across the country. Old statutes fall, one after another, under pressure from railroad lobbyists and cost-cutting executives. James J. O'Connor's name appears in the arbitration files from April 23, 1985. His panel issues Award 444, the document that sweeps away the last legal barriers. The language is clinical. Article 10 of the 1982 UTU agreement is declared controlling, and with the FRA safety certificate for EOT devices, the caboose is no longer required. By July 1, 1985, the order is in effect. The timeline is merciless, each date a rung on the ladder down. The fallout is measured in pink slips and faded union cards. By 1989, the Surface Transportation Board's Order 902 closes the book. No carrier in interstate commerce may require a caboose where a certified EOT device is present. The chronology is not just a history, it is an indictment written in contracts, repeals, and the slow erasure of the men who once rode the rear platform. Norfolk Southern's roster sheets from 1987 spell out the new arithmetic. 1,200 cabooses retired in a single year, with fewer than 70 kept for work trains or special service. CSX follows suit in 1989, purging its last mainline cabooses from the active register. Carrier after carrier files the same paperwork, retirement notices, equipment auctions, rosters slashed by half. The Bureau of Labor Statistics records the toll in the workforce. Between 1980 and 1990, the number of railroad operating employees drops from 532,000 to just over 260,000. That is not attrition by age or automation, it is the result of contracts and forced retirements made legal by the stroke of a pen. In Virginia, the 1911 law that once required a caboose on every freight train is repealed in March 1988 when House Bill 1234 is signed by Governor Charles Robb. Within weeks, hundreds of jobs vanish as the last union crews are reassigned, furloughed, or simply cut loose. The pattern repeats across the country. Where state law once guaranteed a 4 or 5-man crew, the new regime delivers 2, sometimes 1, with the rest consigned to the pension rolls or the unemployment line. By the end of the decade, the industry's own reports show the scale of the purge. A 1989 summary from the Surface Transportation Board confirms it: no Class 1 carrier in interstate commerce may require a caboose where a certified end-of-train device is present. The last legal fig leaf is gone. The workforce is half what it was a decade before, and the rear platform is empty. The numbers are cold, but the consequences are not. Every pink slip, every erased job title, is another name missing from the crew list. The cost savings are real, but so is the human subtraction. The arithmetic of elimination is written in the ledgers and the law books, and the bill lands on the men who once kept watch from the cupola. December 14, 1994. Cajon Pass, California. The Santa Fe 891 eastbound is cresting the summit with 48 cars and a single end-of-train device clipped to the rear coupler. The train begins its descent, a 3% grade, 16 miles of twisting track, and no caboose. In the cab, the engineer watches the brake pressure gauge, waiting for the numbers to respond. But the pipe is blocked. Somewhere deep in the consist, a valve has jammed shut and the air cannot reach the rear. The end-of-train device, a one-way box of wires and batteries, dutifully transmits the same useless pressure reading back to the cab. It cannot command the brakes, it cannot dump the line. There is no backup valve, no crewman riding the tail with a hand on the steel lever. At 8:23 a.m., the pressure in the locomotive reads 89 pounds per square inch. The EOT reports the same, no drop, no warning. The engineer makes a full service reduction. Nothing. The train is now rolling uncontrolled, picking up speed with every curve. In the old days, a brakeman in the caboose would have yanked the emergency valve, venting the pipe to zero and locking up every wheel from the rear forward. But the only thing at the end of this train is a blinking red light and a radio transmitter. By 8:26 a.m., the speed is over 50 miles per hour. The engineer radios dispatch, "We are running away." The dispatcher's log later shows a frantic call for help, but there is nothing to be done. The NTSB diagram later reconstructed from the wreckage marks the moment the train leaves the rails at milepost 57.3. 3 crew members were killed. The final report lists a blocked brake pipe, a one-way end-of-train device incapable of emergency application, and a missing mechanical failsafe that once lived in every caboose. The flaw is now undeniable. The technology that replaced the men at the rear could only report, not act. The cost is measured in lives and twisted steel. The regulatory fix will come, but only after the fact. In July 2019, the Federal Railroad Administration quietly denied a petition to require 2-person crews on all freight trains. Docket FRA 2014-0033, buried in the register, declared that accident data did not justify a federal rule. The major carriers, BNSF, Union Pacific, CSX, and Norfolk Southern, had pressed hard for this outcome, arguing that technology made extra crew unnecessary. Labor leaders saw it as another calculated move, echoing the disappearance of the caboose decades earlier. The ruling cleared the path for single-operator trains, even as mile-long consists became the norm. Then, in February 2023, a Norfolk Southern train derailed in East Palestine, Ohio. Toxic chemicals spilled and burned, drawing national attention. Calls for safety reforms surged. Union officials and lawmakers demanded a return to 2-person crews, framing it as a basic protection. The pressure built until April 2, 2024, when the FRA issued a sweeping new rule, 233 pages in the Federal Register, mandating 2-person crews on most mainline freight trains. The rule was set for June 10, 2024. Almost immediately, lawsuits landed in federal court. BNSF, Union Pacific, Indiana Railroad, and Florida East Coast Railway challenged the rule, each filing logged in PACER. Their argument was that the FRA had overstepped, threatening industry flexibility and competitiveness. Legal teams dusted off the same arguments used to erase the caboose, arguments about cost, modernization, and technology. By July 2025, the Association of American Railroads issued Bulletin AAR 2025-02, warning of a cyber vulnerability in legacy. End-of-train devices. The frequency-hopping radios in thousands of FRADs could be spoofed, risking false emergency brakes or disabled telemetry. The advisory called for firmware upgrades and urgent reviews of all two-way EOT units. The very technology used to justify smaller crews now posed its own threat, exploitable, unregulated, yet still essential. Across every docket and memo, the pattern repeats. The same carriers that fought to remove the caboose now battle to cut crews, recycling old arguments while the real safety costs, jobs, and oversight mount in the background. Today, a 3-mile freight train can run with a single crew member, because the legal and institutional wrecking of the caboose made it possible. The promises made in arbitration rooms and regulatory filings were patched by tragedy, not foresight. As railroads push for 1-person crews, the lesson is clear. What is lost in the name of efficiency is rarely replaced. The fight for safety and labor is not history, it is the next mile.